Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming. Last night, at the gaming table, a couple of odd things happened to me. I got to witness the best and the worst of role-playing. I was fortunate enough to be playing in a game ran by one of the greatest GMs I have had the pleasure to play under, a very good friend of mine. And the game was Lovecraftian, more William Hope Hodgson, based loosely on the novel and movie The Devil Rides Out, and our characters, investigators of a sort, but more of the dilettante variety, or dilettante as some people insist on pronouncing it, than the sort of rough and tumble that you often get in Call of Cthulhu. A friend of ours had been roped into this cult, who were all about bringing Beelzebub into the world and indulging all of their sick vices. And we understood that they were participating in a great ceremony in a valley of great importance that we'd managed to locate, and that they were going to bring this devil into being here after an orgy of gluttony, of lust, greed, and every other one of the 7 deadly sins had been practiced for all intents and purposes. Now, how were we going to get in there? The ideas were mooted that we would stand around the outside with guns, just as we did in Shadows of Yog-Sothoth, in fact. And having had a bit of meta experience, shame on me, I was reticent to do something like this again because it doesn't generally work. I wanted to go for a different route. That, and I wanted a different role-playing experience. I spoke in character. My character, Lieutenant Curtis Edward Arkwright, spoke with his good friend, the luminary Professor Charles Petrie Smith, on the kinds of garb that these cultists wear at these sort of ceremonies. And he said if they're not completely nude, these Satanists, these foul, despicable cultists, often wear highly stylized costumes. Some dress as animals, some dress as more abstract things like the sun or the moon and so on. So it came upon me that we should intermingle in costume, and we were discussing, well, how should we get in? How many people will there be there? We discovered there'll be around 100 people there, so it shouldn't be too difficult to actually sneak in to the revelry dressed in an elaborate costume. And while I wouldn't say it was the most serious suggestion in the world, I went along with, let's go dressed up in a pantomime horse costume. Not necessarily the pantomime horse with the big champing teeth and the legs that fly out all over the place, because obviously that would look somewhat egregious amidst all of the highly stylized Satanists' costumes, but dress as a horse. And it also means we wouldn't be dragged into the orgy necessarily, because it would already look like 2 of us were at it in a horse costume. This was promptly shot down because it just provoked mirth, laughter among the players. There were only 2 of us and the GM. The idea of this revelry going on, these people writhing around nude in the grass, practicing every one of the 7 deadly sins, and in comes this multicoloured pantomime horse with champing teeth, trying to spy out with his wobbly head the friend of the protagonist, just so we could pull him into the horse and whisk him off. So we instead went for a dragon costume, and so that more members of the party could actually fit in like a Chinese dragon costume. And it matched some of the costumes that were already there. It also meant we could pull more people who we knew were actually more on the side of light than dark into this thing and whisk them away after maybe bopping them over the head. Now, the reason I say this is one of the best experiences I've had of role-playing, because it doesn't sound, perhaps, that extreme, that extravagant. It's just the fun that we had in playing it. It is a grim game, it's a dark game. We never lost sight of that. For instance, our characters were deeply appalled and shocked in character at the sorts of things that these Satanists get up to. We were told about how the leader, one man by the name of MacArthur, who was played by Charles Gray in the movie The Devil Rides Out, would be practicing the kissing of the bishop's ring, which is, of course, an inversion of the Catholic ceremony. And in the Satanist ceremony, and this has actually occurred at Black Sabbaths, I understand, you actually kiss the lead Satanist's anus. with tongues. You perform analingus on the lead Satanist, and in this game he was a short, dumpy, obese, oozing sweat, horrible little man. Not that it would make any difference to me if he was tall, strapping, black and muscular. The point is, it led to some looks around the party that, do we really want our friends out of there that badly to get that close to the lead Satanist's arsehole? You know, do we actually want to go to that length to actually rescue our friend so that we're kissing this Satanist's anus? Do we want to lock lips with his chocolate starfish, as I've heard it referred to before by people far more common than I? And again, this provoked mirth, but also a sense of horror, because Charles Petrie Smith played as an NPC in this session because the player was unfortunately absent, regaled us with tales of the sorts of things these people get up to in Black Sabbath, and as the GM pointed out of character, this is perhaps the reason most games, excluding perhaps Cult and some Black Dog products, don't really go into a great deal of detail on what goes on at these Crowley-esque bacchanals. It's because they are actually quite vile, unless you are, of course, a rampant hedonist who has no qualms against doing absolutely anything. And so our characters, being quite prim, proper, 1920s, decent sorts, from pretty average backgrounds all told, were shocked and appalled, and we played that to the hilt. We actually played it well, even though while out of character we were laughing, because that's what the British do. We laugh at things like this. We find humour in the most degraded of places, but I'm sure every other nation does as well in their own way. So that I rated as one of my favourite experiences. I just can't remember an experience before that just made me laugh, made me think, there was such a polar opposite, I suppose, between me as a player and my character's point of view. Not that as a player I'd want to get involved in something like that, but I was seeing the funny side. My character actually having to get involved in something like that, in costume or not, was appalled and actually reticent to save his friend if it meant perhaps, well, losing his virtues as a result of doing it. Now, on the flip side, we have more than one table at my role-playing club. We have 3 tables, and at one of them, one of the groups is playing Anima right now. And so they may not want me to talk about this, but, you know, sod it. One of the players, a man who I would gauge is between his 40s and his 60s. I wouldn't like to guess exactly how old he is, but he has been role-playing for a very long time. Seen as something of an experienced gamer. And his character, from what I understand at one point, well, from our table we suddenly saw him stand up. We saw him stand up, mutter some choice words at the rest of the group, put on his gear, and just leave. He just left, walked out of the club. And this left them all in something of a stunned silence. One of them went running off after him. So I shouted across, "What just happened?" And they answered, his character, in their game of Anima, I think slew a city guard, I think that's what they said, and so he was arrested and subsequently sold into slavery. And he couldn't take this. The player just couldn't take this. And I've seen things like this before. You know, I've seen players sulk when their characters die. I've seen them get upset. I've seen them storm off or stand in the corner, and I understand this player has done this before as well. And I just, you know, I wonder what's going through their head. You know, why would they act like this? Do they lack that fundamental maturity that sets game from reality? They're playing a character. If they were in a play and if they were in Romeo and Juliet and they were playing Mercutio, would they be pissed off and so upset that they just storm off the stage because their character dies a few acts in? Or should they act like a bloody adult, realise that it's a game, and play it. If your character has fallen upon bad circumstances because of actions you have made the character do, then surely you should make amends in character, if your character wants to make amends. If your character wants to go and kill himself because he's been sold into slavery and he can't deal with the shame of it, then fine, make your character kill himself and roll up a new one. If, however, you're unhappy with your character's lot, then roleplay your character trying to get out of slavery. I'm sure the rest of the party will try to help you. It's just mind-boggling to me that on one night you can have on one table a fantastic gaming session where everyone's having a good time. It's a grim game, it's a dark game, but we're finding humour in it, we're enjoying ourselves, we have smiles on our faces. On the other, there's this session where a player just can't handle the fact that his character, a fictional entity, died, or got imprisoned, or got sold into slavery. It makes me just want to... It makes me question what makes people like that get into a hobby like this. And I said this to my GM, and the GM said a friend of his told him it's basically just a cheap form of therapy for some people. And that's all it is. Some people like to roleplay because it's a way of exerting control, I suppose, having some power over a destiny. Being able to do things that you can't normally do. You create a character so that you can live out your fantasies, that's fair enough. But then if your character somehow falls afoul of the rules because they break them, then, you should live with the consequences. Use it as a learning tool. Perhaps don't act like an idiot again. I don't know. Anyway, I wanted to just present those polar opposites, good versus bad, and I was just interested to hear your thoughts, and maybe some video responses. I'd like to hear of one of your best experiences and one of your worst experiences, some of the worst people you've roleplayed with. That's always a fun topic. Anyway, thank you very much for watching.